Mr. Smash, thank you for being here today to go over some of this material. If it's possible, if you could go back and sort of tell us the history of this specific Tiger grant at the heart of this, it's a big part of this discussion anyway. I know it's in Mr. Priester's ward, isn't it? Is that correct?
It's in both of y'all's, wouldn't it?
Anyway, the number when I first heard about this, I think there was a number like 16 million, and I was thinking that was the amount of the grant money. Can you go back and tell us when this thing got started, what the price was at that point, and any changes that have happened since then to this point now?
So I think offhand, the best I can do to sum that up is the amount of the federal funding was $16.5 million originally, and that was for both projects. There's now an additional $3 million that's available. There are some other funds that the city will use to also work towards the project. Now, jogging my memory, I do believe we were somewhere around the estimate of maybe like 24 million, maybe initially. But since then, as we've gotten other information in, the project had gone up to, I believe, 35.5 and is now at about 38.5. That's what we were told as the design work has been done on the projects and has worked through. So the amount that we'll get from federal funds is going to now stay pat at that 19.5 million. 38.5. Mm-hmm. So
How much we get from the federal government?
19.5. There's some additional sources I think that we have out there as well that'll get us probably up to a total of like 24 and a half. So we will have to make up the difference regardless.
So we got to come up with $19 million.
So what's the match? Yeah. So the original match was quite a bit less.
It's
so
80-20?
Yeah, it's
Right.
80-20.
So originally we thought we were having to come up with 20% of $17 million or $16.5 million.
That's correct.
And now we got to come up with $19 million.
Pretty much.
And so
It's half.
that's a whole conversation beyond this conversation that we need to talk about. And then we need to talk about the return on investment of spending, over $20 million on that project. Is this project still viable at the price tag?
I don't have a problem with the.
Can I have some follow-up questions?
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
I don't mind those
Councilman
questions.
Foot,
So I want to make sure I understand this. So initially it was going to be like 24 million. I've got that written down. 24 million price tag. Who?
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify the question. Was that the price of the project as a whole, or the price of the amount of the Tiger grant? Because I think those are two separate things. Because I thought we've always had the understanding that we were going to have to spend more than we were receiving through the Tiger grant to do these two projects. No. It's you have to match the federal grant plus whatever above the federal grant covers all of that.
Yeah, it's from what I understand, it's so explain this to us. It's total price of the project, right? And from the total price of the project, it's 80-20.
No.
Good job, bring clarity.
Okay, yeah.
All right, so I think this will clarify. The original application total to now has basically doubled for the total cost of the project. It is basically doubled because the original application was for about 19.5 to the federal government. We did not get that full amount at the time. We got the 16.5 million. But since then, as the numbers have come back from all of the work that's been done on the project, the estimate for both projects total combined is 38.5.
Okay, here's some follow-up questions for you and Mr. Williams, if he's the man that wants to answer this. When we got started, then whatever the figure was, 19.5 million or 20 million for the project, who determined that price? And then I'm also interested in when the price went up to 24 million, who determined that price? and now that it's at 35.5 and now 38.5, who are the people that determine those prices?
Charles Williams, Department of Public Works. In the initiation for applying for the Tiger Grant, there's an application process. And in this application process, you break out a scenario of how you will use the funds. It was divided up into two projects. One was West County Line Road. The other one was State Street. We felt pretty confident on West County Line Road as it relates to those dollars. The bulk of that money was going to be needed to do State Street because it's called greening the gateway, and so you wanted to put a lot of green application into that particular corridor in order for to make it more enticing to get the reward. So that was done. Some of the elements as relates to the actual condition of the road were a lot of money was not put into that, and so when we got the design consultant on board and we started looking at State Street, it was determined that it was a lot worse condition than what we actually applied for in the funds. We actually thought that we can go in and do a mill and overlay and do all the other work, but that's not the case. We're actually going to have to reconstruct it. So from Hartfield to probably Choctaw, that particular section is basically going to have to be reconstructed. New sidewalks, you're going to have to cut out, old 51. That was not in the application. So now you're looking at a price tag that has elevated. And so now, when you look at that original $16.5 million, it's not going to be enough. And so now that the feds have come back and said we'll give you an additional $3 million, well, you can direct that $3 million towards State Street. But when you look at what a total bid will probably be somewhere between $19 to $22 million, you're still going to need some additional funds on top of the match. And what I've learned from fortification and High Street is, you better make sure that you have enough dollars set aside because there's something that you're going to miss in that project. And you want to try and alleviate as many change orders as possible, but you also want to make sure you have a funding mechanism in place. So if you do have that change order, you'll have a method of paying for it. So that's kind of where we at right now. Now we have to obligate those funds in June. And so there's different ways that possibly we could do that. I think it's going to be up to finance and Ms. Jones, how we want to do that. But I think that the thought is that you have $16.5 million, and then you have whatever you need over that to get to that total estimated project cost, and whether that money is up front or how we want to back it, that's it's really up to you all. But
how much distance is this we're talking, the project? How much work are we getting done?
West County Line it's a little bit shorter. It's actually will be tying in the section that was done about 10 or 11 years ago into East County Line. Mm-hmm. The State Street project is somewhere a little over 2 miles, I think, plus or minus.
So I guess are we these prices of initially 19.5 and then 24, 35.5, 38.5, are you the person who determines that, or is there a third-party consultant that comes in and gives us a price estimate?
Well, the design consultants will give you a most probable cost as relates to what their projected project will be, and that's what we're going off right now.
So who's the design consultant?
Neil Schaefer.
Neil Schaefer.
Yes.
Okay. So these prices come from Neil Schaefer?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. They have given us a most probable opinion of what they think the construction cost will be.
You mean the parameters of the project, from what street to on State Street?
On State Street, it'll be from Hartfield to Shepherd.
I'm trying to find this on the map. I can just kind of understand what we're talking about. I know it's away from.
Okay. So essentially, the bulk of the increase comes from the fact that we're not milling and overlay in the street. We have to do reconstruction.
Yes, sir.
Okay. For 2 miles, essentially.
I'd say probably from Hartfield to Meadowbrook.
Mm-hmm.
That particular section would have to be reconstructed.
Okay.
The rest of it, I think, could possibly just be a mill and overlay.
Okay. All right. Holly Hill needs it too. Tiger grant funds. Councilman Priester.
Yeah, I think what we're sort of balking at is what is this work we have to do? I drive up State Street and it looks pretty bad to me. What are we actually talking about doing with this money? And what is it just we need this money because the Tiger Grant has now become, those projects have become bigger, or are there other things that we plan on using with this money if we decide to draw down? So just talk me through, why now? What are we going to do with this line of credit, and what's our oversight to make sure that the money is spent efficiently and effectively?
So basically, the why now is the fact that we have the June obligation date for the Tiger Grant. So that's the urgency of definitely making sure that we have that portion of the funds covered. The rest of it comes also off the fact that the projects, as prior director had given to Ms. Jones, pretty much has not changed. There was an understanding that certain projects would be into construction phase, and that funding would be needed for that. To have a major bridge replacement that total monies cannot be allocated to at one time from the collections of the 1% based on our projections of those collections. And then, as I mentioned, we also have drainage work, which, there are only, I think, four projects that have been approved via or dealing with drainage via the commission in that mode of approving projects. What we would like to see from that is, of course, a master plan approved that will then allow for the work to get done that we're deeming needs to get done, we being the city. So I think the rest of the funds would go toward those projects. Now, if it got to a situation where we didn't need them for that, then obviously we would not spend unnecessarily. But we have seen a need. I think, as I mentioned before, some of the costs that we looked at before that were provided were very aggressive. And what we found time and time again, and we've also had these failures and deterioration. So Robinson Road Bridge is an example. And so that kind of changes what you have for your previous priority. And we're going to continue to see those failures. It's not and again, I don't want to start a panic on that, but the sentiment has been there. There is failing infrastructure all around us. Even when we do repairs, there are repairs that are down the road. The support for internal capacity improvement is greatly received in our department because of what we are missing. But there are many pieces to that puzzle. It is no longer set up where you plug and chug. You can't just put people in, tell them to do a particular work, and get them to do it. To a large degree, so the knowledge that you have had over time has been lost to a large degree. We are sitting back in a situation where you're dependent on specific people, which no organization should ever be in that role. You should be in the point where your processes will take care of you and will actually cover the work that needs to be done. So in order to go in and increase capacity, in many cases, what we would have to look at is we would have to bring in, the outside knowledge to actually train them. So you may be doing an augmentation program where you use a third party in order to do that. Get everybody trained to be able to do the job. Because again, I hadn't been in this role long, but even in my previous role with the city, I felt and I believe one thing, and I always espouse it because it's true. You only do what you do well. All right. If I'm in business, I am not going to be in business doing something that I can't do very well because I'm not going to be in business very long. For public works, there are core competencies. Now, those core competencies we should do. We have to work on those, and we have to try to build up the capacity to do that. Beyond that, I don't think we need to work with that. Now, opinions vary on that, but we've got to get to a point where we work on those things that we've identified that we can do well, and that also recognize an investment that we're putting in here. Because, again, we go back, the top sentiment that everybody hears is we need to get rid of these potholes. Potholes can be a safety issue. They often are. But what we recognize is we have failing utilities underneath that are causing potholes, that are causing us to have sinkholes even in certain spots. So that's the investment of the dollars, I think, is where we're going to have to work. And kind of what we found with the State Street project, you are having to make repairs to the utilities. You're going to have to look at, again, water lines that may be causing the problems. One of the issues that you bump up against on the 1% commission has been, that as well. The projects are only going to be so on a project basis, which I think has already been established that that's not really what statute says. It should be a master plan. The master plan should give consideration to the utilities as well. Because you can't, whereas it looks good to go about and just resurface wherever you're safe to resurface, you still got failing infrastructure that's going to continue to fail. So there has to be a balance between that in order for you to properly move forward. That's how we're looking at
Historically,
that.
the way in Jackson has been that we pave it and then we dig it up and repair what's underneath.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to get away from.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's what we did for years and years and years.
Mr. Foote?
Smash, initially when this Tiger Grant came available, and am I correct in understanding that this Tiger Grant and its approval, that the 1 cent sales tax commission approved this when it was like at the $20 million price tag? Did they approve that?
Okay, that's a little more of a complicated question. I think because we've been kind of trying to narrow down what was approved. What we do have approved right now is design consultants based on the 1% commission. I think that what was presented to them was a match amount.
Okay.
And for consideration.
Is that going to be like $4 million or something?
Yeah,
okay,
that's correct.
So they approved that to go forward with the $4 million?
I think that's something we're going to have to verify. I know it's been floated around by a couple of commission members that they only approved of the 4, and we haven't had a chance to look back at the minutes, but we'll have to verify that.
Okay. All right.
But that would be based on the original application.
Right. Yeah, I understand.
Yes, Mr. Stamps?
Thank you, Mr. President. So we've walked through what is being proposed to spend roughly $22 million of the money on. What's the other expenditures?
So the way that we've basically broken this down in terms of uses, we did have some projects that were approved for design by the commission in year 1 that are basically now just sitting there because there's no construction dollars to go along with that to move those projects forward. Also, I mean, it's very likely that upon approval of a master plan, we also would be able to look at needed projects that we could then identify, because you would hope that the master plan ends up being a construct so that the city can then do appropriate projects that will fall under that auspices, and then we could move forward. But what we have basically put down here, we had some suggested work like we've done previously, like with our major streets projects, where we could kind of continue that. Excuse me, where we could also look at, the drainage projects that, for instance, haven't gotten done, mainly because, and I know Dr. Williams will probably really agree with this, but a lot of the issues that just can't be resolved by we're going to go out and resurface, because we are asked that question a lot. These are drainage-related projects, so the drainage does need to be reconstructed so that it's appropriate for those areas. So those are items that would not currently be covered. We would need to kind of work those projects. We also looked at some additional water line projects and a couple of major bridges. May Street Bridge is a consideration for these funds, because I think, was the estimate, is it like 9 million? 6 million? Yeah, 6 million in additional funds that would be needed to complete that. That basically puts together, where we're thinking about using the funds. So it would go some to resurfacing. We would have some that would go to some water projects that are not clearly called out as well. So So under no circumstances do we intend to frivolously use the money. We believe that in order to really stretch the funds that are being collected right now, that leverage would be necessary, because ultimately, you can only do so much with $13 million a year.
Yes. Will you finish? I'm sorry.
I can keep going. I just want to listen to
So you may have answered this question already, but just so it's clear in my mind, is there outside of the Tiger Grant funds that will be reimbursed by the federal government, is there a plan in place, a list of projects and associated costs that exist, so we can see and we can say, okay, this $90 million is going here?
Yes, you would be able to see what we have, what we intend to use the projects for today, yes.
No, I mean, do we have it now? Has the plan been drafted as of right now, so we can say, okay, once this is approved, this $90 million is going towards these particular projects?
I mean, yes, based on the drawdown schedule is based on just we have several areas of projects that have been, already put together, talked about. Some of them have been presented to the commission on that project level basis, but not necessarily approved.
Okay, so, do we have it? The council?
We can.
Now that I don't know.
We have it. We can make it available.
I think that'll be. Let me make sure I don't have it in my packet first.
Really?
Because
I basically did.
Yes, ma'am. Councilwoman Simone.
I think that what we're saying here is that we're asked to make this huge decision about what's before us today, but we just aren't comfortable with knowing exactly where the money's going. And it's like, it's in the sky somewhere, but Lord knows we need to have these facts to make a decision as monumental as this one that would tie the city up for many, many years.
And one of the reasons is, and you're exactly right, but we also are accountable to our constituents. So when we get a phone call to say, hey, Councilman Priest or Councilwoman Simone, we saw today that you approved $90 million for infrastructure. What are y'all using it for? And an acceptable response for us to our constituents is not, we'll get it for you tomorrow. We need to be able to have the information before we make a decision on the funds in which we're going to spend. And it's not okay just to say, okay, we're going to do $30 million in streets. The next question is, which streets? Are there streets in Ward 6? Are there streets in Ward 4? How is that broken up? You know what I mean? And not trying to be... I've always, since I've been on the council, I've been in favor of us going to the market to leverage the funds so we can do more projects quicker. I've been on record saying that. So I've always been in favor of it. I think at this point in time, which is one of the reasons for the comprehensive master plan, infrastructure master plan to be approved. So we'll have exactly what projects will be, what projects, how much they cost, what's the timeline, what's our schedule, So in order for us to take a step like $90 million, which is a lot of money for us, I mean, 90, yeah, yes. I just think it's important for us to know exactly what projects will be done or expected. What's the time frame? How much will they cost? And I think that is just a baseline of information that should be distributed to the council before we can make a decision. And that's just my opinion. I don't know, Councilman Foote.
Let me ask a question frame it a different way, similar goal. I'm curious on the $90 million figure, whether that was driven by how much we could borrow based on the annual sales tax expectations, or whether that was driven by how many projects we had in the pipeline that we wanted to get done. Well, how did we come up with $90 million?
I'll address that.
Okay.
First of all, the $90 million was included in the initial resolution as a placeholder. We were not sure what the actual amount would be. We thought it would be around $80 million, but again, we were not sure. So when the indicative term sheet was received, it was indeed for an amount up to $80 million. So that's why the 90 is bracketed. It was not a firm number. What we have received is a proposal for up to $80 million. In terms of the drawdown schedule, which Mr. Smash referenced, I am happy to pull up and show, assuming I can access this, what has been presented to the bank. The bank is far more interested in two things: the sales tax collection numbers and what has been and is to be provided and approved by the Sales Tax Commission. So they have not asked for, nor have they been provided with things on a project-by-project basis. The categories that have been presented to the bank are, as Mr. Smash mentioned, major streets, drainage, water, bridges, the two Tiger projects, design work, and a broad construction category.
Yes, ma'am.
So we can show that on a projected drawdown basis, but what's not been provided to me nor to the bank, nor have they asked, is on a very specific project-by-project basis.
Yes, ma'am. So I totally agree. Did I cut somebody off?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. I totally understand. I think the bank and the council, I hate to speak for the entire council, but me and I know what Councilwoman Simone just mentioned, I think held different two different burdens of responsibility. So the bank, of course, needs these broad categories to identify how much they will allocate towards the city or make available. For us, we need to know project by project because we have to go to our constituents and say, look, Roberts Road Extension Bridge, $2.4 million, or, Terry Road, $1.3 million, looking to be completed in May 2018, whatever,
No, I understand.
So I think that's where we are. That's where I am right now. And so
Councilmember Foote also asked how the $80 million, 80, not 90, was derived. And that's based on, it's a balancing act. The biggest driver by far is the pace of the sales tax collection. A secondary driver is looking at the project need, the city's needs, and balancing those. What does the city need versus what it is conservatively anticipated to collect and when? So there's a cash balance now. What you'll see on the drawdown schedule is that it is basically the draw in each time period is based on cash now, cash collected every month, balanced against the projected spend down of that portion of the money. And again, the spend down does not anticipate, to Mr. Stamp's point, in any way, shape, or form, that every penny that's collected via the sales tax is spent either on projects or on debt service. The city is building a cushion and will continue to, while for the life of the sales tax collection is the anticipation.
Okay, can you tell me, how much is in the account for the 1 cent sales tax? So another 13 million, whatever it is, comes in. How much is in that fund right now?
Well, I think the more complex question is what's in it right now versus what's unallocated. There has been between $35 and $37 million collected.
Okay.
But some of that has been allocated toward projects which are,
Okay, how much has been allocated then?
31 million.
Let her answer.
well, I'd rather let Mr. Smash or Ms. Day
Okay.
answer.
Yeah, so it is about 31 million that has been allocated to projects based on the last financial sheet that we had, and that was distributed at the previous 1%
Does that
commission
include
meeting.
any money for a Tiger Grant? The Tiger Grant
The
project?
only Tiger Grant funds approved so far is on design.
Just on design.
Which ones?
On the only thing on the Tiger Grant funds that were basically approved by the 1% commission and therefore contracts lit and also approved by the council, obviously, is the design on the Tiger Grant projects.
Yeah, but how much was that? About $5 million?
No, I believe it's like 1 million. I'll find it here in a second.
And while he's looking, the total collections as of February 15th are $40 million.
40 million, okay.
So 40 million collected, about 32 million encumbered or allocated to those projects.
Allocated is the word I would use.
Okay.
I believe on here, like West County Line Road has an approved budget, I believe, of $1,090,000.
Okay. We had two people. We had Councilman Stamps, we had Ms. Anderson Woods, and then we had Councilman Priester.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the drawdown schedule and the pace of work, how much will it get to on an annual basis for us to have to repay back?
Well, the funds, per the still being negotiated term sheet, whatever is to be borrowed has to be borrowed within a 12-month period. So if at month 12 only $68 million has been drawn down, the city would have to go back to the bank and say, we agreed that everything would be drawn down within 12 months. We're short of the upper limit of the line. Can we borrow the remaining 12, for example?
No, so that's what I'm saying. So we're going to basically have to draw down $80 million in a short period of time. Then how much would the payments be?
That depends on the timing of the draws.
Well, just kind of ballpark me. Will it exceed? How much on an annual basis are we planning long range to put towards debt service?
It would be on an annual basis. I'm ballparking because, again, rates change. The LIBOR rate changes every 30 days. But I'm ballparking less than 2% of the $80 million.
What if we just reduce the line of, I'm sorry, but
So 2%. So I think maybe I should redirect my question.
Okay. And I apologize if I don't understand.
Colleagues, how much of this money do we feel comfortable putting towards debt service?